This video is kindly sponsored by Squarespace. For any aspiring content creators or business owners, Squarespace is the perfect platform to get you up and running with your own website. No coding skills needed, instead select from dozens of pre-built templates which you can customize as much or as little as you want using simple, easy-to-use drag and drop tools. I'm currently using Squarespace to design and build a website for Galaxy Class Pictures, my new production company. The latest addition to the site is an Our Work page, designed to exhibit the various projects Galaxy Class Pictures is creating, which you'll be hearing more about soon. But for now, I was able to upload custom image assets and add new text quickly and easily, preparing the page for when we're ready to showcase our newest films. Follow the link in the description to start making your own website with your own domain name and use the promo code RowanJColeman for 10% off your first purchase. Thank you once again to Squarespace for helping me keep the lights on over here. And now, on with the video. In 2009, between the hyped-up releases of Star Trek and Avatar, a scrappier, low-budget sci-fi feature, District 9, became the surprise hit of the year. The film was a box office hit, grossing more than 6 times its budget, and earned several Academy Award nominations. It was an impressive debut for then 30-year-old Neil Blomkamp, and anticipation was high to see what he'd do next. Following the success of District 9, many producers and studios in the wider entertainment industry had their eye on Neil Blomkamp. His former creative mentor Peter Jackson was by that time far too busy with the Hobbit movies, and so Blomkamp began shopping around his next project, a sci-fi action movie depicting a future where the most rich and powerful have left the planet to live on a gigantic space station, while the rest of humanity suffers on Earth. Eventually the project found support at Media Rights Capital, who funded initial development, which mostly entailed the creation of concept art and other production design elements.
In the 1970s, NASA held this conference to try to come up with the most viable way to habitat humans in space. And so in the 70s, Stanford University won out the design for that concept and came up with the idea for this thing called the Stanford Torus. There's this kind of cool thing that, now that I'm a functioning filmmaker, I kind of realize that if I want to, I can actually work with some of the people that were really inspirational to me when I was young. And Syd Mead was absolutely one of those people.
One of Neil's favorite paintings of mine I'd done for National Geographic a long time ago. And it showed this inverse world with the terrain curving up essentially out of sight.
Even if he had not drawn the National Geographic image of the space station, I would be there anyway. But when you combine the image of the space station with that love of his design work, it's like a no-brainer. The second I realized that, I was like, we should try to get Syd Mead to do the design of Elysium.
Neil and I have been Syd Mead fans forever. His work on Blade Runner, through Tron, everything else is, from a design standpoint, is gold.
Syd's ideas often would go to speculative fiction and to making it, like, just building it correctly. And then I would steer it back to more metaphor. Like, I'd be like, no, it's actual mansions on space. Because you could imagine building a space station like that and building, like, these super high-tech, like, hexagonal living areas, and that's appealing. Like, a lot of the time I would see that and I would start thinking in that direction. But the second I feel like you do that, you take away the metaphor.
He said, this is supposed to be Beverly Hills in space. Think about making it a little bit more pastoral. So he sent me aerial shots of Beverly Hills, and he said, sort of scale it to this, with the streets and the mansions. So I found out how big a tennis court is, regulation tennis court, and started to scale these mansions, how big they were, in the shot that Neil sent me. And that gave me a clue, because now I could match it up to my scale across the breadth of the rotational torus.
And so that was the thing with Syd, where he would bring ultra-real JPL aerospace ideas, and I would bring metaphor. We would kind of clash with one another and then figure out this kind of middle ground.
Together with Blomkamp, MCR met with several major studios to pitch the project, backed up by these concept designs. In early 2011, Elysium found its home at Sony Pictures, with Blomkamp being joined by producers Bill Block and Simon Kinberg. Also joining Blomkamp were several returning crew from District 9, including editor Julian Clark, production designer Philip Ivey, cinematographer Trent Opalock, and of course Sharlto Copley. However, this time Copley was only functioning in an acting role, playing the psychotic mercenary Killer Kruger. The lead role of Max was first offered to South African rapper Watkin Jones, aka Ninja of the duo D Antwoord. Despite being a huge fan of District 9, Watkins turned the offer down. Blomkamp's second choice for the role was American rapper Eminem, who was interested but only if the film shot in his native Detroit. The production, however, was already looking outside the states for filming locations and so couldn't abide. The third choice for the role was Matt Damon. Damon was extremely enthusiastic about the material and could bring his experience with the Bourne movies to the action scenes of Elysium. Once cast, Damon shaved his head and embarked on a training regiment of martial arts and gunplay to prepare for the role. Joining Damon and Copley was veteran stage and screen star Jodie Foster as Secretary Delacour. During filming, Foster apparently adopted a French accent for the character.
Evacuate everyone under level 5 clearance out of the building now.
However, at some point it was decided to redub many of Foster's lines, softening the accent and arriving at a voice much closer to Foster's natural one. Rounding out the cast was a then unknown Diego Luna as Julio, Wagner Moura as Spider, Alice Braga as Frey, William Fichtner as John Carlyle, and Farhan Tahir as President Patel. Stargate fans will also spot a blink-and-you'll-miss-it appearance from Michael Shanks in the Elysium control room. Filming began in July 2011 in Vancouver, which played most of the Elysium locations. While much of Elysium was built inside a studio, the production also made use of several beachfront mansions. Wealthy suburbs of Mexico City were also used to play parts of Elysium, but Mexico City was mostly used for Earth-based scenes. The exceptions were Max's apartment and workplace. The apartment was built as a set, and the factory was a real factory in Vancouver. Echoing production on District 9, filming also took place in a real slum and landfill in Mexico City.
You start arriving on set before the sun comes up, and we drove in there the first day for, a 2-week shoot in the garbage dump. And with this very minor amount of dawn light, you could just see this sort of shape of garbage everywhere around you. In the early dawn hours is actually when it smells the worst. I had a brief moment where I was like, I literally can't, I'm unable to do this. Like, I actually can't film in this environment with the smell, and it was so overpowering. And then by 9 or 10 a.m., the smell would be mostly evaporated, and you'd be focusing on the work, and you'd be fine, for the rest of the day. And that happened for, the 2 weeks that we were in there. Dude, that's like a full-on dust storm. That is the insanity of shooting in a landfill in Mexico City.
Spider's hideout, rather than being a studio set, was actually a disused wallpaper paste factory in Mexico City. The art department simply had to add furniture, monitors, and cables to create the set. To differentiate Earth from Elysium in the film, handheld camera was used to exclusively shoot the Earth-based scenes, whereas the Elysium scenes used cranes, dollies, and Steadicam. Handheld camera is only used on Elysium towards the end of the movie. All of the production design was handled by Weta Workshop, who had previously worked on District 9. For the Hulk suits worn by Max and Kruger, 2 versions were constructed for each character, one to be worn by the actor during dialogue scenes, and one to be worn by a stunt double for action scenes. In both cases, the suits were made to be lightweight and unobstructive, so it was comfortable for the actor. Applying Matt Damon's makeup each day, including tattoos, the radiation poisoning effects, and Hulk suit, meant Damon often spent up to 2 hours in the makeup chair before spending another 30 to 40 minutes to fully assemble the Hulk suit. Filming proved to be highly demanding in terms of stunt and in-camera special effects. The interior of the Raven was a large set built on a gimbal rig. This allowed the set to shake for real as opposed to the old Star Trek trick of a shaking camera. The gimbal rig was later adjusted to a roll rig to spin the entire set for the crash sequence. Wherever possible, Blomkamp opted for using practical explosions and squibs for bullet hits, and wire gags and dummies rather than digital doubles. For a handful of shots, Blomkamp and cinematographer Trent Opalock used a multicam rig made up of DSLRs to move a virtual camera around the subject during the action. Filming wrapped in December 2011 after 14 weeks of filming.
This has been another awesome ride with Blomkamp. We're fucking tired. but we are high as can be just from the whole experience.
For the visual effects of the film, Blomkamp once again utilized Image Engine from Vancouver, this time joined by MPC and Whiskey Tree. For the robots in the film, the same process was used for the aliens in District 9. While performers wearing mocap suits were on set, to achieve the final shots, the visual effects teams went through a painstaking process of match-moving their rigged character models with the performers, and then removing the performers entirely so the CG robots could be composited in. While Image Engine and Weta had designed Elysium, most of the fully digital environments were handled by Whiskey Tree. The majority of spacecraft were handled by Image Engine and MPC. During filming, real helicopters were used as stand-ins for all aircraft and spaceships, which would then be painted out and replaced.
Just having that real thing, that helicopter just off the deck of this dump in Mexico and kicking up the dust, which just swirls in these incredibly detailed and random patterns that you would never imagine for it.
Playing the Raven, we have a picture helicopter that plays as our Raven, which we will replace that with a digital Raven. The picture helicopter is filmed by the camera helicopter. We're using a Eclipse stabilized to do all of that aerial footage. Fred North is our helicopter pilot for some of these action sequences, and he's one of the best in the world. His flying skills are scary to see by the untrained eye, for sure. We've done a lot of flyovers, a lot of low ground coverage of what the action was. Picture-to-picture or helicopter-to-helicopter footage, air-to-ground footage, rolling cameras on the ground, looking up at our picture ship. The rehearsals have to be tied in to avoid any kind of nasty accidents or colliding helicopters. The end result of that spectacular flying is some really good footage.
For the music of the film, Blomkamp had discovered Ryan Amon through YouTube. Amon had never composed a feature film score before, but instead had worked in trailer music.
I didn't see the script, I didn't see any footage, and I think he wanted it that way. He purposely said, just go and write, sit in your room, this is the premise of the film. Whatever your mind sees, whatever comes out musically, just write.
Working with Ryan's score was great in that we had all of his music available to us early on, which is unusual for a lot of films.
So it's this combination of getting to approach it at the beginning without seeing anything and just imagining it in my mind, and then getting to see part of the picture and then realize, oh, okay, I was going down the wrong path here. Let me pull it back in, but still use some of those concepts that I came up with and now go down this other path now that I've seen what it looks like and what I think will work better.
After a challenging development in production, Elysium was released on the 9th of August 2013. I remember being a little let down by Elysium on my initial viewing, but on a recent rewatch, I can't really imagine why. I think Elysium was really the victim of high expectations. District 9 was such a fresh and exciting film with so much experimentalism and creativity, it makes sense to expect Elysium to follow in those footsteps. However, Elysium is a much more conventional sci-fi action movie. That being said, there's nothing really wrong with that, and it's not really a flaw with the movie itself. An uncontested strength of Elysium, however, is its presentation. Neil Blomkamp's direction is once again excellent. Like District 9, this is an extraordinary sci-fi world which feels grounded, gritty, and truly believable. The rough handheld look of Earth and the smooth, glossy aesthetic of Elysium never feels jarring, as both locations feel like two parts of a fully coherent world. While Sid Mead's primary contributions may have been to Elysium itself, it's clear Weta Workshop adopted his general philosophy for the film as a whole. Every gun, mech suit, vehicle, spaceship, and environment has an innate tactility to it. I am a big fan of sci-fi tech and particularly cyberpunk gadgetry in general, so all of this stuff tickles my fancy big time. And once again, all of this is supported by some incredibly impressive visual effects. There isn't really a single weak effect in the whole movie. Even when the CG elements are obvious, they're executed to such a high technical standard it never detracts from the scene. I suppose one point of contention is with the shaky cam used in many of the action sequences. However, while it is very shaky, it's clear this was a creative choice rather than the editor attempting to cover on-set mistakes or create more action where there wasn't any. The geography of each scene is always clear, and the shot choices always support the choreography. This is gritty handheld action done mostly right. A weaker aspect of the film is the cast, or rather I should say the cast are more inconsistent. Matt Damon is actually very compelling as the lead. Max's condition, dying of radiation poisoning, means he retains an innate vulnerability throughout the film. Even when he's been upgraded with a battle-hardened mech suit, the odds are always against him. In a lot of ways, Damon brings over what made his turn as Jason Bourne so good. Damon is a terrifically effective straight-laced lead compared to Sharlto Copley's unhinged turn as Kruger. This is Blomkamp and Copley once again nailing that Paul Verhoeven balance between drama and humor. Kruger seems to have no regard for human life whatsoever, taking a perverse delight in dishing out death and destruction, even egging Max on in their final confrontation.
Don't give up now, boys. Get up, go. Come on, you got more than that, I know you.
Yet at the same time, he's also a very funny character, reeling off an endless stream of South African slang.
Let's go! I want what's in your head, boy. It's just a flesh wound, bud.
And in his poorly performed social niceties.
Afternoon. Sorry to come bursting into your home. Didn't mean to traumatize your young daughter.
It's a wonderfully over-the-top performance which is simply magnetic to watch. On the other hand, Jodie Foster's Delacour is just as big a personality, though whether that's helped or hindered by the character's strange mode of speech is up to the viewer. I have no idea why the decision was made to dub over Delacour's original French accent. Whatever the reason may have been, the end result is truly weird. To me, it almost sounds like those transatlantic accents actors used to use in the golden age of Hollywood.
But when they come for your house, for the house you built for your children, and your children's children, it won't be PR and campaign promises that keep them out. It will be me.
While it is jarring at first, the voice does have the unintended effect of making Delacour seem even more pompous and arrogant than perhaps originally written, which I think actually works in the film's favour. After all, these are traits which lead to the character's death in the end. Having used Kruger for so long to do her dirty work on Earth, she seems completely oblivious to how dangerous this maniac is when he's standing right in front of her. Outside of these three, however, the rest of the cast aren't quite as compelling or entertaining. Alice Braga's Frey, Wagner Moura's Spider, and Diego Luna's Julio are likable enough overall, but they each lack that extra ingredient Max, Kruger, and Delacour have that make them so interesting. Spider comes close as Moura has some solid opportunities to ham it up here and there, but he never gets especially interesting dialogue to say, and Frey is just a rather thin character in general, made up of one too many familiar action movie tropes. Which I suppose is Elysium's problem in general. It's simply a far more typical story compared to its much more original predecessor. But as I said at the start of this segment, that's not really a flaw with the movie, it's simply the victim of great expectations. Because ultimately what's on screen really works in all the places it needs to. This is first and foremost a gritty and fast-paced sci-fi action movie, and a social critique second. The gulf between the rich and the poor, the treatment of immigrants, the erosion of organised labour, the disparity in healthcare, these are all subjects which are commented on by the film's setting, but they aren't what principally drives the story. This is ultimately about Max aspiring to greater things, but realising he was already part of something greater. While that story may intersect with themes about inequality, Elysium never really sets out to tackle those themes in a tremendous amount of depth. But I don't feel we should miss the forest for the trees in viewing Elysium in that way. So much of the criticism surrounding Elysium is centered on what the film isn't and what it could have done, and while those criticisms are often salient ones, that doesn't mean we should ignore what Elysium does well. It's a simple movie, the classic hero's journey, a familiar foundation, but what's built on top of that foundation is very impressive and enjoyable. Funnily enough, the way Elysium is often discussed echoes the story being told. We're so concerned with what Elysium could have been that we don't realize how good it already is. Sure, it's not as provocative as District 9, but this is still a work of unmistakable passion and creativity. An action-packed thrill ride propelled by dazzling effects and larger-than-life characters with a strong emotional core. Elysium may not be the most transcendently great movie, but for what it is, it's more than enough. Upon release, Elysium was met with a mixed to positive reception. While the film had its fair share of defenders and none of its detractors were especially harsh, overall it was seen as a disappointing follow-up to District 9. At the box office, Elysium grossed $281 million worldwide against a budget of $115 million. Not a flop, but not a huge hit either. The lukewarm reception of the movie is something Neil Blomkamp himself seemed to take quite hard. He later reflected, "I feel like I fucked it up. I feel like ultimately the story is not the right story. I still think the satirical idea of a ring filled with rich people hovering above the impoverished earth is an awesome idea. I love it so much I almost want to go back and do it correctly. But I just think the script wasn't... I didn't make a good enough film is ultimately what it is. I feel like I executed all of the stuff that could be executed, like costume and set design and special effects, very well, but ultimately it was all resting on a somewhat not totally formed skeletal system, so the script just wasn't there. The story wasn't fully there. Back in 2013, however, Elysium's release didn't deter the director much, as he quickly hit the ground running with his third feature film, one which would bring him back to his roots. Thank you for watching. If you like my videos, be sure to like, subscribe and share, and make sure to hit the bell icon to stay up to date with all of my new uploads. If you want to help the channel grow, join my Patreon or YouTube members using the links down below. There you can see videos early as well as some exclusive content. Speaking of which, I'd like to quickly thank all of my patrons and members who are now appearing on screen. Have a good one, and as always, live long and prosper.